Welcome to the podcast. We have Rich Tripp with us tonight. I'm very grateful that you're willing to come on. You have some very, very important topics that you're willing to share with us. Can you tell us a little bit of background about you?
Yes, thanks. It really is an honor to be here. So my name is Rich Tripp. I'm a clinical mental health counselor. I've been in practice for over a decade now and also a certified sex therapist. So I've had the opportunity and privilege to work with teenagers, with adults, individuals, couples, just kind of run the gambit and have just really loved the work that I've been able to do and have been asked to kind of present on some of my experiences and things, and I'm excited to share some of that with you tonight.
Yes, thank you. I love that you're able to talk specifically to moms tonight because we're going to be diving into the topic of pornography, and that's such a prevalent thing in our society. It's become so much more so as decades have passed.
Yes.
You know, it's a huge industry, and it's a lot of things that moms are facing and they don't quite maybe know how to navigate it. They may not know how prevalent it is. They may not know what to do when their child may have a concern with pornography. And so I'd just love to hear from you. This is what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. You've helped so many teens navigate something this hard, and I just feel like we have so much to learn from you.
Oh, well, I'm excited. I'll just jump right in. I think one of the things that I really start out talking with first is kind of changing the understanding. I think that within society, a lot of times we just jump to my loved one has a pornography addiction. You know,
and
kind of
we
a
label
thing.
that very
And everything is an addiction, and that's pretty scary terminology a lot of times too when you start thinking about that. And quite honestly, the diagnostic criteria that we use to diagnose people, we don't even have criteria for pornography or sex addiction or anything like that. And so there really is just kind of a lot of question in terms of, you know, what is somebody experiencing? So some of the terms, I don't use addiction very much, but I kind of have what I call an alternative approach to this and use terms like out of control sexual behavior and problematic sexual behavior.
Okay. And then for other terms of use, maybe, you know, like a constant, you know, behaviors with this type of thing. Are there any other, I guess my question is, are there ways to understand different levels of association with this?
For sure. And that's what I really love about this, that like there's someone who maybe is struggling with pornography or other sexual behaviors that maybe it's happening once a month or every couple of months. Okay. It's not really accurate to describe that as an addiction.
Yeah.
However, based on their values, and that's something that I think is really helpful that we can talk about with mothers too, but like based on people's values, if this behavior goes against their values, by definition, it's problematic.
Yeah.
And sometimes they may even feel like it's out of control. And so I really like that because it allows us to be able to work with people based on what their values are and really help them to get to a place that they feel is healthy rather than, well, here's an addiction and here's this. And so there are people that do meet, well, not necessarily criteria, but what I would consider addictive behaviors.
Yes.
But yeah, it just is a better umbrella term that I found when working with people.
Yes. And I also feel, you know, labels can be powerful. And so when we just blanket label individuals like that, it may be a lot less severe than what's actually happening, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of shame that's associated with this behavior. And then if you throw in kind of common terminology with addictions, like once an addict, always an addict, it kind of starts to create more of a negative perspective than a hopeful one, which is really what we want when we're working with people and trying to help them overcome this behavior.
And I'm guessing you've seen a lot of hope in this regard because I feel like that is a commonality. It's like, oh, if you're hooked on porn, like that's how it'll always be.
It's over. Your life is over. You'll never have healthy relationships. There's a lot of misconceptions with that. And one of the things that I love to do first session with people is to just instill that hope, let them know that there is a ton of hope that they can have because that's usually the first thing they lose. So So yeah, it's a beautiful experience
That's
really to
amazing.
help them with that.
That's amazing. So going on to the other side of things, there's a big thought process right now saying pornography in general is not does not have negative consequences for an individual, for a family, for society, and so it should be just widely accepted at this point. What are your thoughts on that?
So, a lot of it depends again on what people's values are. I have some concerns about pornography, various concerns in different ways. As a sex therapist, I'm very pro healthy sexuality. Pornography is really bad sex education. And so, particularly for young teenagers, well, and even for adults, if that is constantly what they're consuming, it can have a tendency to create associations and attitudes around sexuality that are not really healthy. And so that is a concern for me a lot of times. The amount of time that people spend on pornography. In fact, there's actually a pornography platform that usually does a year in review for how much time, various things, but they added up the amount of time spent, and this is from 2019, but the amount of time spent just in 1 year based on all the people that went to their platform. Any guesses as to how much?
This is one platform.
One
this isn't
platform.
saying, this is
It's
internet world.
It's a hub that
Yes.
sends people out to different sites
This is based on hours.
or time in general. Yeah.
I don't know how long.
So in 2019, it was 6,667 centuries worth of time was spent in 1 year when added up. Centuries worth of time. And then we know what happened in 2020, early 2020 with COVID. It raised another 25%.
Oh my gosh.
So close to 9,000 centuries worth of time.
I would have been so off. I would have even, when you were saying 6,000, I was like, okay, where are we going with this? How are you calculating this? Okay, that's really, really shockingly disturbing, actually.
Yeah. When I share this, I often say, if all of these people just cut their porn use in half and did something good the rest of the time, how much further would we be along as society? How much more could we do and accomplish with 3,000 or 4,000 centuries worth of time and good behavior? So you've got poor attitudes about sexuality. You have a colossal waste of time, and time is a valuable commodity that we have. Again, there's a lot of shame that becomes associated with pornography, and that goes back to what people's values are. And if their value is that they don't want that to be part of their life, but they're struggling with it, we start to see shame, hopelessness, worthlessness. Some people, start to experience suicidal feelings, so there's a lot of mental health issues that can come with that as well. So yeah, definitely some unhealthy things that can come with this. Yeah.
That can come with this, and realizing that I think traditionally people have thought that this was a primarily male targeted, audience. Let me think, how long would this have been? Probably 13 years ago. I was taking a course, and they were saying, this was 13 years ago, and one of the largest CEOs of one of the largest porn industries was saying that her main target audience is young girls.
Oh yeah.
And that was 13 years ago at this point. And so have you seen, with the time that you've been in this, helping youth through this, have you seen that change? Have they really started, how much is targeted for males versus females, I guess?
So when you think about traditional pornography, they've really got the market with most of the men and young men. There's a lot. I think it's in the high 90s. People who've been at least exposed to it, probably fairly high, of young men and men who are struggling with pornography, really high percentages. So yeah, the market really has started to shift more towards young women, and they're pretty blunt about it. I don't hear a lot about marketing towards underage young women, but more marketing towards women themselves, and creating feminist porn or those kind of things, which is a little bit different in terms of what is shown and what is depicted, but yeah, they're really trying to go after young women and women that way. In fact, I was just looking at some of the research, and particularly for young men and for men, visual types of pornography is what is most attractive. And that's because of testosterone, all those kind of things that play into sexual drive and visual attraction and all of that. And so with higher levels, typically for young men and men, you know, they're more drawn towards visual pornography. Whereas for women, we're seeing a lot more of like fan fiction, erotica, sexualized kind of stories that are becoming more and more popular because the visual stuff is not as appealing typically for a lot of women, but the stories and that coupled with, you know, explicit sexual depictions and stuff is something that becomes more attractive. Typically for women.
And as I was doing some research, I saw that it can be anywhere around the amount of about 60% of women at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing.
What do you feel is about the average age that I wanted to say person, but at this point, that a child is exposed?
It is a child. Typically, it's somewhere between 10 and 11 years old is their first exposure to pornography.
Wow.
And then what I've seen in my practice and kind of what the research starts to show is that typically, particularly for young men, once puberty starts, then it becomes more and more prevalent and becomes more and more of an issue.
Okay.
Which would be understandable
with puberty.
Puberty.
So do you know any understanding about like the statistics on like where they're coming across it? Is this just like it's randomly on the internet? Is this being shown from another person? Do we know like how these kids at that age are, like the most common way that they are being exposed to it by chance?
So I've read a lot of different things, and some of it has been, you know, probably decades old research of the way that they did things. You know, a lot of it is the pornography industry will purposefully misspell certain things that are marketed towards children. I did have a client once that misspelled Boo from Monsters Inc. And this happened to be a young woman, and it was something that started a struggle for her in her life, and it started because of a misspelling of a Disney character. And so there is that. I also think, you know, with social media, you know, it's really easy to get pulled into things, to have people reach out, send things, to just have links that are associated to certain things. And then we're seeing a lot more, or I'm seeing a lot more of people who are taking cartoons and anime that maybe is a little bit more geared towards children and creating pornography out of it. And so, you know, you might look up, you know, something exciting about Avatar: The Last Airbender or something like that, that a kid might really enjoy. And there's a lot of explicit content that people are just creating themselves for that purpose. So I would say that's probably how, at a younger age, just curiosity and looking for things that they're interested in. And there's just so much that gets linked to that.
Much out there. And I think as parents, you know, it's like, oh, look at this cute kids show. And I've heard, I mean, it was probably 5 years ago now. I realized, you know, it may look like a really cute kids show, and it could be Disney characters and, you know, in a porn session. You know, there's just so much out there that I think as parents, if this is something important to you, to really take the steps necessary, because it's almost like we're just inundated at this point.
We definitely are.
And it's just, I wanted to just share something that I found as far, this debate on, is porn really harming people in society? And it was just saying that through this research, it was saying it indicates that porn consumers are more likely to sexually objectify and dehumanize others. I just want to know your opinion on this. More likely to express an intent to rape, less likely to intervene during a sexual assault, more likely to victim blame survivors of sexual assault. I thought that was interesting. I was like, Interesting. The next one was more likely to support violence against women, more likely to forward sex without consent, so like sexting, and more likely to commit actual acts of sexual violence. So, I mean,
Yeah, there's a lot there.
There's a lot there.
And I agree that it can increase likelihood. I always want to be careful. Like, I am not pro porn by any means, but like, I think sometimes we kind of get into this idea of like, well, if somebody is struggling with it, their life is over.
This is what's going to happen.
And they're going to turn into Ted Bundy. And, and there is a very famous video of Ted Bundy talking about the effects of pornography on what he did.
Wow.
And so, but if you looked at the prevalence of pornography use, there'd be nobody left alive because everyone would be serial killers killing everybody else off. And so I think a lot of the times what happens is, it can create a greater likelihood of things, but it's sort of like adding fuel to a fire that's already there. If you have someone who has more of a propensity to be violent towards women, if you have someone who, objectifies, and it can create those issues, but I think
it's not necessarily saying that it 100% will in all cases for everyone.
Yeah, we want to be careful with that because it goes against all the hope. It's like, well, you've seen porn,
then you're
a horrible person who probably is going to rape and murder someone at some point, and that's just
not the
true.
case.
That's not.
And
the
I think
case.
that's good to hear and realize, going back to the how prevalent this is in someone's life, the reality that it's probably not an addiction. And, I mean, I think we're talking about such a wide range of use cases. And I think that's important.
I do believe it's a slippery slope as well. Like, is there more of a propensity to objectify someone? Well, sure. If you're just watching videos that are, visually sexually explicit, you're not really thinking about relationships and feelings. Like, it is a very objectifying experience. And so it can make it easier to do that. And you pair that with other behaviors associated with pornography, and you can start to create more and more of associations of like, oh, this is how it is. And so there is that level. But again, not everybody who objectifies is going to be violent. Not everybody who's violent is, and so it's definitely something we want to be careful of, but not like create a panic that, my child has seen pornography, his life is over, or her life is over.
And they'll never be the same, and this is hopeless. They'll never be the same,
and good luck ever getting married and having a healthy relationship or whatever it is. So there's a balanced approach to it. And again, it's not to minimize the impact, but also I think the scare tactics come in pretty easily. And we want to be careful with that as well.
And especially the shame side of things, where it's such an easy, and then when people feel shamed, they generally start feeling hopeless. And when you feel hopeless, you don't want to change, or you don't feel like there is a way to change at that point. So
if you're hopeless, what is the point?
Yeah.
And I've seen so many individuals who, were like, Rich, I am the most messed up person who's ever lived. Or, other people can overcome this, but I'm never going to be able to. And when you're in that state, you give up. And that is heartbreaking. Like, leave me in tears after a session, heartbreaking to hear that. And so actually we try to correct that belief pretty quickly, but it is really hard to hear that.
That is. Okay. So tell us more about this. Where do you want to go from here, as far as in all the experiences that you have and all the research that you have? What do you want to dive into?
All right. First, particularly for mothers, and bless you mothers, like, you have such a beautiful opportunity to help your loved ones and your family members. I've never been a mother, but I'm married to an amazing mother. And, sometimes it can be daunting and kind of overwhelming, when you feel like you're fighting the world to protect your loved ones. Yeah. But just want to say, like, you bring such a valuable just skill and gifts to this. And it definitely is helpful. And I've had the privilege of working with a lot of mothers who, are like just an integral part of the help and the change that their loved ones are going through. And so again,
and how many kids do you have, really quick? Tell us.
So I have 4 children, ages 19 to 10. So yeah, we're running the gambit there.
Yes,
and 3 of them are teenagers now.
Yeah, so you're in the thick of it yourself.
So we're in the thick of it, and it's fun, but we know the challenges that can come with raising youth nowadays.
Yeah.
One of the things that I often recommend for mothers is to first identify what are your values. Now, again, as I've worked with people, they have different values regarding pornography, what pornography is. Like, how would you define pornography? Because if you can't even define that, how do you explain to your children what is going on? And so really being able to define that, talk about it. For some people, they might think like, oh, well, this is not a big deal. And, we're not super worried about this, where other families or other people would be like, oh no, that's definitely pornography and that goes against our values. So it really becomes kind of this individual, I don't know if journey is the right term, but just opportunity to explore and define what pornography is and what are your values around it, so that
to really
you can
get
start
clear,
to teach your children.
get really clear on this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it's pretty clear when it comes in, and that kind of stuff. And like, we know that the world will want to shove everything at them. It's going to be important to have very clear, defined boundaries based on those values.
Yes. And I'm assuming you would say, teach this far before.
Yeah. Before 10 or 11 years old.
Before 10 or 11 years old. What are the ages that you would say to start like prefacing, or, hey, if you see, I've, what is the good, like good pictures, bad pictures,
Good pictures, bad pictures. Yeah. It's good to start that anytime they can understand. You can read that book with them anytime they understand. But I would say, particularly as you're watching your children be online and on the internet and on devices more often, that's a good time to start having a talk about, hey, there are some things that could come up. Yeah. And, here's what we would like you to do. Here's a good thing to do when it does come up. I
think that's so smart. And I mean, you hear all different things, whether it's on the bus and that kid may not have a phone, but another child is showing something, or even now, I was talking to a group of women that their children go to a local school here. And they were like, yeah, we were just frustrated because our kids at a young age were given these tablets by the school. And there's been all sorts of stuff of kids finding porn on these tablets, and so it's just, and they're wanting to have these parameters and permissions, but it's something that talk about it sooner than later is what I'm hearing.
Yeah. And that really is the most important. We can talk about filters and those kind of things, and those can be helpful, but they're filters. And I don't know that there's any true pornography block if your kids are online.
Wow. I think that's really humbling, and also a reality check for moms. Because I think we want, at least for me, it's like, I want to know that my child is safe. I want to buy something or use something that I know if this is on my computer, on this or whatever. But in what I've researched, the true end all is the child's own integrity. Yeah. Right. So,
and those are the skills we want to develop and help them with, because eventually they're going to grow up, they're going to leave our home anyway. And, if they don't have those tools, then it's going to be a lot easier for them to get pulled into that behavior. So
that makes sense. That makes sense.
So defining values obviously is really important. Being able to convey them, teach those values to your children. Hopefully they embrace those values as well. And typically we have those values, like we just kind of inherently have those values, but it's important to have them be defined. Yeah. Because a lot of kids, particularly the first time they're exposed, they're going to feel some shame, or they're going to be scared, or they're going to have, all of these awkward feelings. Yeah. And a lot of that may just be inherently, but if we can just help them understand, like, oh, well, that's because this is a behavior that goes against what your values are and what we've taught, then it becomes much easier to explain that to them and help them navigate
help
that.
Them understand and process what's going on instead of just And so for a child that comes across that for the first time, what do you tell parents to teach children? Because, I know that it's like, there's a lot of issues of, a parent just shaming a child right off the bat. Like what would you say is the best way to tell a child in that moment?
Okay, great. And I'm going to kind of look over here. I've got a lot of information here, but
Great. I love it.
before I get in that, I just kind of want to talk about some different levels of use, because we're kind of hitting on accidental exposure at this point, which is great. That's usually the one we start out talking about. So obviously accidental exposure is just coming across it. It's not intentional, those kind of things. Then typically I see things like occasional use. That might be once a month or a couple of times a year, where they kind of just slip up. They're looking at things intentionally, but it's not very frequent. It's not a habit or anything like that. Right. Still is going to create some conflict internally at times, but not necessarily as intense as some of the others. Okay. Then frequent use, which could be once a week to, a couple of times a month, kind of somewhere in there, a couple of times a week. And then finally, compulsive use. And that's where, again, we don't have a diagnosis for addiction, but we see people that have definitely kind of fallen into addictive behaviors with pornography. And that's where it's taking over almost everything in their lives. They just fixate on it. They may lose jobs. They may not be able to function. They may spend $10,000 worth of savings over a weekend, kind of a thing. That's where it really becomes a lot more problematic.
Very extreme behaviors.
And so the way that we approach this and in explaining that is, it is a little bit different based on the level of use that they are. So sorry with that preface, but going back
good to really delineate that.
Yeah. And so as I've talked, particularly with mothers, and with women, I've kind of hit on, what to do both with a spouse and with a child. And so if that's okay, I'll kind of hit on that. And some of them are similar, but obviously they're a little bit different as well. Okay. So, I'll start with the child. If they come across something accidentally, some of the first thing, and this is going to be across the board, stay calm as you possibly can. Don't yell and don't shame them. Now that's really hard. It's a lot of deep breathing, and like you may feel like your world has just turned upside down. It's like, this is not what I expected. This was not supposed to happen to my children.
Because we always think it's like, maybe,
we're going to save them, and I don't want to be doom and gloom, but again, when you're looking at the prevalence rates of just even exposure, you're going to, it's a high likelihood, but just trying to stay calm with that, because your child is going to be looking and watching how you react or respond to those circumstances. And they're going to be hypersensitive and hyper aware to what's going on. It's also good for a spouse as well. Stay calm. Don't yell. Don't shame.
Don't shame. I love that. I was at a conference with a lot of parents, and a speaker was so wise, and he asked the audience, he said, I want all of you as couples to go home tonight and think about the worst thing your child could come and tell you. And then I want you, in detail, he's like, the worst thing you can imagine. And then I want you to think in detail exactly how you would respond to that child, because the way you respond will likely make or break that relationship for the rest of their life. For sure. And it was whoa, because we don't think it will happen to us. We think, it's going to, that is going to happen to somebody else. But the reality is, no, our kids are going to go through hard things. Yeah. They are. The default is they will go through something that will be hard, that they will tell us. And to be able to already have that planned, and so that we are that safe place for that child to come to, I think is so important. So important. Yeah. Interesting.
But no pressure, right?
I know.
If we can kind of, not that we want to negatively predict the future, but just kind of recognize that, hey, there are going to be some tough conversations. Can we prepare for it mentally? Goes a long way.
Wow. And to do it as a couple, right? If there's
for sure
2 parents present. And whatnot. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So stay calm. Don't yell. Don't shame. Help the child learn from the mistake. What happened?
So get curious. Like, hey, how did that happen? What do you think? Why?
Yeah. I mean, my oldest son was very curious about things and went in to type in, there was some flower that had a name that definitely would have brought up inappropriate images. And so as he's like, oh, Mom, I'm going to look up. And my wife goes running into the computer, like, no. We'll, if you want to know some more information, we'll try to find it for you or whatever. But there's that curiosity. But if we can kind of learn, how it's happening, is it coming through video games? Is it coming through social media? Is it coming based on searches? Did somebody send it to them? So just kind of understanding how did it come in to begin with. That's going to be really important. It is good to take precautions, filters, passwords, all of those things that you can do are helpful. I just like,
they're not an end all.
The reality is, that stuff will come through. It'll find a way.
But at least the prevalence or at least
it's not wide open to everything.
Right.
And so,
can we go into this just briefly? Or I don't know if you were going to go into this later, but what are your, there's filters. I know there's some parents that are like, I don't have phones go into bedrooms at night or electronics. Or do you have any things that you see that are like helpful?
Yeah, I think it's really good to not let their kids have their phones at night. Okay. Our kids charge their phones in our room at night, and for a lot of reasons. But whether it's with social media and different things, it just is really good to not let them have their phones at night.
And I think, pornography is one, but even online sexual predators. There's so much more, right? Like we are focusing on the topic of pornography, but there is so much more out there.
And when we talk about social media, I can tell you some stories about the online predators.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can definitely get into that, but it's a doorway for anybody really to come into your home through that device. Wow. So, do your kids get smartphones? That's a question. A lot of people decide like, no, we'll do a Gab phone or this or that. There are pros and cons to each of those things. And so, and even with smartphones, you can find ways to lock it through the phone. And then there are a lot of other apps. And you can easily Google what are the best parental apps, but I do have a list of some of the apps that are helpful. Custodio, nice. And I think there's something called Bark. We use Custodio in our house, and just different things that will block certain websites and apps and let us know how much time kids are spending on each thing. So there are a lot of resources out there.
Yes. And we'll definitely put those in the description.
I'll get that over to you. All of those things are good. Help with those precautions. Talk with your child about how the pornography made them feel.
Okay.
And
interesting.
Be open. Like, maybe they're like, well, it kind of felt good.
Like
and that might scare you, like, oh my gosh, now they're addicted or whatever. But like, though, it's bringing up some of those feelings that are important feelings in life, but they just don't have a whole lot of experience managing.
And like context too. And I think when you're willing to have an actual conversation, I think the child can realize that you're taking part at a deeper level into what they did experience instead of wrong, bad, no. It's like, how did that make you feel? Yeah.
So that's a good one. Ask them what they think they could do differently to avoid the exposure. Like, what can you learn from this? This was an accident. You don't have to feel horrible about it. But
it's like, this wasn't your fault.
How can we learn from this? And that might be really helpful for a parent because, again, we don't always know every way that it's coming in. And so collaborating with them is really helpful with that.
Smart.
And then praise them for telling you about the exposure. Be like, oh my gosh, let's go get an ice cream. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, that was awesome.
Wow.
And because it'll cut all of that shame away, and you're reinforcing the good behavior that you want them to demonstrate throughout their lives.
That. Okay. And you don't think that kids would be like, hey, if I get an ice cream cone every time that, no.
Well, if it keeps happening, you might want to have that discussion about like, wow, you really keep accidentally coming across a lot of stuff. Well, let's go back to learning what we can do to not come across it.
I'm just teasing. But no, I think that it's really beautiful that we create that type of relationship, that kids are feeling comfortable enough in a relationship to come to us. And I think being able to build a relationship where your kid can come and tell you anything is vital, especially with how much abuse is happening in the world today. Having that relationship in so many facets of their life will pay dividends to be a trusted source that they can come to.
Yeah.
So
For sure. So those are the things I would recommend for a child. For a spouse, stay calm, don't yell, don't shame. And then really, a spouse should, be able to kind of talk about learning from the mistake and what are some of the precautions that maybe we need that it came across. And so kind of a lot of the same ones, but yeah, still a lot of similar principles.
Yes.
Don't yell, don't shame, stay calm as much as you can. And again, I know that that's hard. It's so easy for me to sit here and say it. It's a lot harder to put it into practice when you're faced with it. But again, it just makes a world of difference when you're approaching those things.
Yes, yes. As far as things not to do with the spouse, what are things to do in that situation?
Yeah, I think just talking like, how did you come across this? Hopefully, if you're finding out about it, my guess would be the spouse has disclosed like, oh yeah, I came across this, and and I think that's an important thing too. Like, is we talk a lot about fidelity agreements and contracts between spouses,
yes.
And it might be talking about like, do you want this to be reported? Do you want me to tell you about this, or do you trust me to just move away and not have it be an issue and learn from it myself, versus every time something comes up, or if it comes up that I need to come and tell you. So a lot of that varies, I think,
between couple to
spouses.
couple. Yes. And I think it's something important to talk about at any point in a relationship.
Yeah.
Because to say, hey, what works for us, and what do we feel about this? Because at least it was about 10 years ago that I was doing a lot of research on this. And it was interesting to see that a lot of the times that the fidelity side of things that are being broken wasn't necessarily that the spouse was viewing porn. It was that it was being hidden. It was that it was the trust factor that was being broken. And so if you can keep that trust there, which you can, even if a spouse has consistent use in pornography, you can keep that there. And there's ways to keep that trust and still be working through something like this. So.
That's right on. Yeah. Most of the spouses that have their spouse who's, struggling with pornography, it's the lack of trust. It's the lies that hurt more than the actual behavior. Yeah. Which sometimes is hard to believe, but it truly is.
So that is true. Wow. So there are ways to navigate that.
So yeah, communicating that contract or that understanding is really important. I've had some clients that are like, oh my gosh, I got to tell my wife because an ad popped up and it was a girl in a bikini, or something like that.
Like,
and that's okay if that's what the spouse wants to know, but
it's like, how are you not going to get away from something like that?
Most of the time the spouse is like, oh my gosh, don't tell me that. Like, you don't, that's a little obsessive. I don't need everything reported. And so if you guys can get on the same page
is what's important.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's really good. So those are the ones where we come across with an accident, or accidentally come across pornography. Mm-hmm. Now, as we kind of move into the intentional use, we're going to still have some of the things that are similar, like stay calm, don't yell, don't shame. And
really quick, when you say don't shame, can you give us like one or two examples of what that would look like?
Oh my gosh, why are you doing, how disgusting. I can't believe you would look at this filth. That is so gross. What is wrong with you? Something along those lines.
Something like that.
Sorry, that was a little too much.
Yeah,
a little too drama there.
No, but that's what it, And in those heightened emotions, right? That's what probably a lot of people are feeling and experiencing.
Yeah, you want to get all that out and there's all those questions.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So.
Okay. Those are good examples. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now
along those lines,
yes,
we want to be careful. So again, with children, assure your child that they are good. The behavior is not. It's, love the person, not the behavior.
Yes.
And
I think that's that truly is what shame is. It's not saying, oh, what you did was wrong. Who you are is wrong.
Yeah.
And so what you did was bad. You are bad. It's delineating that. And I think it's hard for a kid to understand that. It's like, because automatically, when in any situation when you make a mistake, it's like, oh, you feel that, and to be able to show a child that they're separate from that is important.
Yeah, and I think it plays into, I know you've had Dr. Otis on the podcast, and the I am statement, like, oh, and all of a sudden you're defining yourself by this behavior. It's problematic for sure. And so
to help them right at the beginning, to show them that
behavior's bad, you're good. And that's why we're concerned. If we didn't love you, if you were a miserable person, maybe, no, we wouldn't be less concerned, but like, we don't want this to be something that's in your life. And so helping them with that. Identify how they're accessing the porn. How are they getting it? How is it coming in? Is it they're supposed to be doing their homework and the computer, there's a laptop and they take it into their room. Is it on their phone? Which I'm trying to think of the stats. I think it's close to over 60% are accessing on their phones more than anything else. Wow. And so yeah, typically now it's phones and that kind of stuff, but how is it coming in? Help them understand where that's coming from. Talk about ways to protect them from the porn. Okay, we're going to put some filters on. We're going to turn in our devices at night.
And to be able to say, like, this is for you. Like, we're not doing this because we want to be really strict as parents and we want to control. It's like, we're doing this to help you, because especially, I mean, from what I've understood with, as the brain develops, especially during those years, I mean, with, any type of addiction, if someone is addicted during those very, very integral developmental years, there can be more struggles later on. So to show them, like, we're doing this because we genuinely love you.
Yeah. It's not a punishment.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you start before they even struggle with taking their phones at night, like, it's not even an issue.
Right. It's like, point. This is how it always is. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, a lot of the clients that I work with, teenagers and even adults, if they just put their phone in another room at like 8:30, it would cut out 70 to 90% of their porn use. So much of it just kind of happens in that time where they're bored and they're tired and they're flipping through because they want to be entertained. And
you have lower inhibitions when you're exhausted. And
it becomes one of those things that, they're so much more vulnerable and susceptible at that
makes
time.
Sense. I mean, that makes sense.
And then the last thing that I would recommend, or that I want to talk about, is set up some times to check in with how they're doing with pornography. And the reason for this is, I think particularly at the beginning, it's like almost every time you have a conversation, you want to be like, and how are things going with porn? And how are things going with porn? And you make your relationship about porn. And so they're not going to want to talk to you about because you're always going to bring out porn.
Right.
And so if you just say, hey, we are going to meet once a week. We're going to take a half hour. We just want to sit down and talk about how you're doing. Yeah. The things that we've implemented. Is that helping?
Is it working? Is it
where
not?
you at? Is the frequency increasing? Do you see it decreasing? We'll kind of check in that way. And then, just kind of continue to have a relationship with your child.
Outside of just that topic.
That's not just about pornography. But I think out of that fear, we want that constant reassurance that they're okay.
Yeah.
And they need to be children.
Yeah.
And need to have other interactions that are healthy with us.
And at the end of the day, they are a separate human being.
Yeah.
It's like at the end of the day, they still have their agency. And we can help and facilitate but if they don't want to change, they're not going to change. Yeah. So that's a recommendation with children. Spouses, again, there's some similarities. But I would say a big one, don't personalize it. And what do you mean by that?
That's a big thing. Like, a lot of spouses
don't take it personally.
Will blame themselves for the use. Well, I didn't do this enough. I didn't do that enough. I
don't look this way.
I wasn't this. I wasn't that. And that is a huge, huge mistake to make. It's very common to have it happen. In fact, anytime something bad happens to us, we have a tendency to personalize. And
I wonder why that is. It's like, why does the human psyche do that? I wonder.
Would you like to know?
Yeah, I do. You have the answer. Tell us.
I have at least one of the answers. And again, because we have these difficult circumstances, we are so scared that if we make it about us, we feel like we're in control. So if it's my fault that it happened, I can change that bad thing so something like that doesn't happen again. So if my husband is doing this, well, if I just did more of this, because obviously I wore my makeup more, or if I was more available or whatever, then it won't happen again. I've listened to young women blame themselves for being sexually assaulted. It was my fault I snuck out of the house. It was my fault that I got in that car with boys that I barely knew. And really the connection or sorry, I just lost the term, but like
the blame or the shame.
The blame, but just kind of across the board, it's this idea of, well, again, if I'm in control, I can keep that from happening again.
And there's signs it's like, you can't, I mean, there's people that will do things to you
Yeah.
and you can't control it.
Yeah. It's a
like,
pseudo sense of control. Like it
yes.
makes you feel like you're in control, but it just tears you away. Like you're
Mm-hmm.
criticizing yourself, you're blaming yourself, and it really is not going to stop anything. And so, and that's hard. That is scary.
I
One
think
of the
that's a
hardest things to let go of
hard
control.
reality to like hear that, because I think for women, I think there's a lot of women at this point where it's like, I can't compete.
Yeah.
Like all what's out there. I mean, especially at this point with AI. I mean, there's
Yeah,
so many, and it's just exponentially getting, so much more real. Everything. It's like, well, I can't compete with that. It's like, you're right. You can't, but you don't have to.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point. Like there shouldn't be a comparison between you as a live human being that has a relationship with this person and something completely fake.
And you don't want to compete. I mean, I know maybe you feel that way, but like you don't want, most people do not want that lifestyle or want to do those things. And so, yeah, you're right. Let's get rid of the competition aspect part of it.
Just accept yourself as you are, the way you are, and know that you are valued just as you are.
Yeah. Do you know that models in real life can't even compete with images of themselves in media? Like it really, like they don't look the same. And so it is kind of foolish, but we get caught up in that trap of, synthetic. I need to compete with that.
It's like, it's fake.
Yeah. I mean, I guess with AI, maybe it gets a little bit easier, but it's still not healthy to compete. So yeah, be careful with that personalizing. And I've got a couple of quotes that I like about personalizing in here that I can share a little bit later on. But yeah, that's a big one. It's really common. I've never seen it lead anywhere good or healthy or helpful. And so we want to be careful.
And I think that's good to tell all women out there. It's like, take that responsibility and just take it off.
Yeah.
It's not about you. No. It's not anything that you can do more or less or change or whatever. It's not about you. Just take that responsibility off.
And you just have to repeat. I love that you're doing the deep breaths, because it's deep breathing and it's reassuring yourself of those truths, because it's so hard not to blame.
Right.
Wow. So hard not to blame. Discuss ways to fight pornography together. So often I see pornography use pull couples apart. Well, he's doing this and she's mad at me now, or what? Like, again, love each other, fight the porn together. And there are going to be different responsibilities that you might take with that. But if you could see it as we are fighting together,
this is a team
versus he's ruining our marriage or our lives or whatever it is, it's going to be a lot more effective for the person who's struggling.
And how do you feel like, can you give any tips on like the best way to come together in that team mentality?
Yes. We always want to be careful, like to eliminate the things that pull us apart: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. Those are the four horsemen of the apocalypse from Gottman. But really, that if you think about that, those are the things that oftentimes couples will do, and they're just battling each other over whatever it is, as opposed to saying, all right, if I cut that out,
if we pull together instead of being
how
divided.
can I be supportive? Now, there are parts that we can get to, like, you are not their savior. You're not the person who's going to save them from this, but how do we work together? And what does that look like? And what do you need? And, and really kind of just exploring those things. And that can be, a very individual experience. Like, people may need different things at different times, but just that the
needs
idea
of, like, what kind of needs are you saying?
Well, I think a lot of it is like, what kind of support do you feel like you need?
Okay. Do you want me to show up this way or this way? Do you want me to be?
It, do you want me to take the router when I leave the house for a little while? Again, that's not always the best solution, but in the moment, is that something that would be helpful? Or, and again, check-ins are going to be really important, finding times to check in. And so just kind of that support along the lines. Identify triggers for pornography. what are the things that are triggering? Are you staying up super late at night with your phone? And, you know, are you a little bit more vulnerable that way? And all of those kind of things. And so just kind of recognizing what those are. Now, we can't escape triggers. Like we are triggered by a lot of things, like, okay, I'll never be bored again.
Yeah.
Or I'll never be alone again.
Again in my life.
Like there are a lot of things that make
sense.
us more vulnerable, but that
can't just be 100% eliminated.
Yeah. But we can also be careful with it.
Yeah.
We can
and have a more heightened sense of, it's like, oh, I'm now in this situation, what I'm going to do about it, instead of, act instead of being acted upon kind of in those situations. Okay. Yeah. Smart.
And then talking with the spouse, and this is particularly, again, for women, because typically it's their husband. It's not always the case, but typically it's their husbands that are struggling with the pornography. But talking with the husband and asking, who are you comfortable with me being able to go to get some support? Is it a friend that we can trust? Is it a family member? Do we just need to go to a group where nobody knows you? Is it an ecclesiastical leader or something like that?
Interesting. Is this because the wife at times can feel so siloed in this situation?
Yeah, for sure. Like they need support. It is tough, but the flip side of it is, to get that support, they have to out their spouse and what their spouse is doing and so. Yeah, that can be a little bit tricky to navigate, but if you can find a few of those people
and that are supportive, that will love both of you, no matter what's going on, and will be there for both of you. Okay.
And again, that the spouse is comfortable with. Like, I know some instances where it's like, I'm putting this on Facebook, or whatever it is, and we're going to tell everybody at Thanksgiving dinner or whatever. Like,
is that, are you being serious?
Like they will just completely throw it out there for anybody who will listen. And again, bless their hearts, they're looking for that support, but that's not really going to help the relationship.
And that can really sever things with the spouse, where it's like, that's not yours to tell, in a lot of these situations.
So it is tricky, but it is important to work together to get that support.
And to be a team as you align on what that support needs to look like for both of you.
For sure.
Because you're going through this together. Wow, that is really good advice. Thanks. Yeah.
All right. Are we doing good?
We're doing
good.
great. Right. I'm loving this. This is so helpful.
So now, and some of the questions that came up might come in here, but as we kind of move towards frequent use or addiction, and again, this could be more than once a month, multiple times daily. I mean, it can vary in frequency and that kind of stuff. Okay. A lot of people will ask me, when do you think it would be good to get counseling? If you're in one of these two categories, that's probably a good time. Occasional use, if it's happening once every couple of months, still not good, but it's still something you can work together on, and you probably don't need, to come into weekly therapy sessions to work on things. Now, if you want to, it's always good to get skills, but yeah, typically more of the frequent and the compulsive use are the times where
it's like, okay, let's go get help. Let's get professional help.
This is starting to take over life, kind of a thing. So,
and do you say with couples, go separately? Do you say, no, definitely go together? Is it separately and then together? I mean, for people that are in this situation right now, it's like, okay, great, counseling. How do we do that?
So the way that I approach it, I love having them both together when it's a couple, for at least the first couple of sessions, because the first couple of sessions, I'm talking about different brain chemicals. We're talking about trigger, like I'm kind of giving them a good framework of, let's talk about what's going on. And then typically it starts to become more and more work with the individual who's struggling. And so, and a spouse is always welcome to come and how can I help and, what's going on. But yeah, I like to have both of them there. So at the very least, so that they know what I'm telling their spouse about pornography, and they can be
on the same page at least. Yeah. Like, oh, okay, this is the advice, and how do we proceed with that?
Yeah. Okay. And I can clear up a lot of misconceptions about pornography in those sessions, because it's like, well, and obviously he's doing this because he's just a perv, or whatever. You're
like, actually,
let's
that's
talk
not
about
true.
that.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful that way. But yeah, a lot of it is individual work at that point. And the same would be for parents, and particularly teenagers. The parents can always be there, but a lot of times, as long as the parents are aware.
Yeah.
it's kind of, I'll get more from teenagers
if they're on
when their
own.
parents aren't there.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah.
So.
And as far as teenagers go, are you able to, with being a counselor, do you feel like they're opening up to you in like the full capacity of what's going on? Or do you feel like there's a lot of it is like, yeah, I'm here just because my mom wants me to be here because she caught me doing the, you know what I mean? Like how open and how, I mean.
The answer is yes to all of those. There are some that are super open. There are some that are like, yeah, I'm only here because mom's dragging me in. Yeah. There's some spouses that are, I'm only here because she's dragging me in too. So yeah, there can be some reluctance. More often than not, though, I see it's the shame. They feel horrible. They don't even want to say the words. They might be looking at porn, but they can't. I had one client that's like, well, I'm struggling with corn. And I'm like, corn?
Corn? What's corn?
Well, and I already knew from the parents what he was struggling with, but I'm like, really?
Like, what?
I'm like, no, I don't think it's corn.
You're like, what?
I don't think it's a dietary issue.
You're like, I'm actually
not
not
corn, but the other thing. And I'm like,
oh,
you can
so
say the word, buddy. It's okay. Like,
so he literally couldn't
say the word. Because again, all of that shame comes in. And so then we have a Harry Potter discussion of like, well, Voldemort, and everybody was afraid to say Voldemort's name and it just gave him more power.
Like,
we're going to do the same thing with
this.
it. We're going to call it like it is and then try to instill that hope and everything. And so.
And with these teenagers that initially come and it's like, oh, or these spouses, do you feel like once you're able to help them understand and take away that shame of like, you are a horrible person, where you're able to help them realize that that's not the case? Do you feel like they open up more?
Yeah, they can.
Okay.
They can. There are some that are just like, they don't want to be there whatsoever. And it's a little bit different. If it's a spouse, I'm just going to be honest with them and be like, listen, if you don't want to be here, I'll take your money. But
like, don't waste your money on me if you're
like, I want to help you. That's my
why
job.
I'm here.
And, but it's not going to be very effective if you don't want to be here. And that's a spouse. Sometimes with teenagers, you can play your mom and dad are going to bring you here no matter what. So we can just sit and waste time, or we can actually work on something.
Yeah. Like, I'm here to help you be successful in life. I'm here to help you. Yeah. Well, let's figure this out. Yeah.
And we try to have fun. Like, it sounds strange, but like I try to have fun with them.
We're
just going to call it like it is. Yeah. We can laugh if we need to laugh about certain things, but like it's just a good place to come and to talk and to get those skills and help. And so
you would be so good. I already know, like, you're amazing with teenagers.
Wow,
and that's
thanks.
probably why it's such a, you see such benefit, because you're not coming in there as a very sterile personality that's interrogating them. It's like, hey, let's figure this out.
Oh, I would have quit my job a long time ago if that's how I had to do therapy. That's too hard. I don't want to do that. No, we try to have fun and just be real and give them hope and all of those things. So it's great. So cool. It's wonderful.
That is so cool.
So if we're talking about children, I keep moving over to this, but
that's great.
Hey, guess what? Stay calm. Don't yell. Don't shame.
Yeah.
But find ways to limit media and internet usage temporarily. Like, do we need to cut them off of it?
And you're going back to like a lot of exposure.
Yeah, this is like intensive,
multiple times, potentially a week, or okay.
That we just want to get them away from it for a while, because now they're really more likely to be using it to cope with things and different emotions. It could be bringing in a lot more shame and depression, and so we can kind of pull them away from that a little bit. That's going to be helpful. Again, it's not the solution long term, but it's definitely helpful temporarily. Talk with a child about how they feel because of the porn. Are they hopeless? Are they feeling worthless? Reassure them that they can overcome this. It doesn't matter how frequent it is, how compulsive. I have seen people that have been multiple times a day for hours a day who've been able to change their lives and be able to overcome it. There is hope with this. And that's the beautiful thing with it all.
That is so neat.
Find a professional counselor that they would be comfortable working with.
I've heard that's a huge deal.
Yeah. And so you want someone who's comfortable working in those issues, but they've also got to be comfortable because they're talking about really personal things.
Very vulnerable
and
things.
Feelings. And so, being able to find that professional help is good.
And I think that's what's cool is that, you with your degree and that you specialize as a sex therapist, you're like, hey, I studied this. You probably can't tell me anything.
I know.
I don't already know.
I was just going to say that. I'm like, you can try to surprise me and shock me, but occasionally I hear new things, but I
Yeah.
don't get too shocked
Yeah.
anymore. And I can say all the words pretty comfortably and
Yeah.
and be able to help out that way. Again, those check-ins are really important. Set up check-ins with them, encourage them when they're doing well. Don't assume that the pornography is going to just stop overnight. I think sometimes it's like, well, now he's had a couple sessions of counseling and we've done all this.
We're good.
We're good. And
It's over.
yeah, this level of use takes time. I mean, just like any behavior, like it takes time to build up to that typically. So the next one that I would recommend is don't assume that the pornography use is just going to change or stop overnight. And again, I think a lot of people will come into therapy and they're like, well, we're getting therapy and we've locked everything down. And so they're never going to look at it again.
It's done. It's over.
It's done. And a lot of times it will take a while for them to get to that level of use. To change that behavior does take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I do recommend is watch for progress and improvement. Are they looking at it less frequently? If it was every day, is it 3 times a week? And all of a sudden you've cut out more than half of the time that you've spent looking at porn.
And so with kids, do you, when they're saying this, it's like, hey, look, like, do you praise them for this, even these small or maybe sometimes big efforts of like, look at this, look at what you're doing. Look how far you've come this week.
Yeah. Anytime you can praise them, and it's got to be genuine. Kids
they
can pick
tell.
up on when people are not being honest or genuine.
So true.
But yeah, if you can honestly praise them, they're going to feel it. And that always helps behavior more than any kind of negative criticism or anything like that.
Yeah, true.
So again, less time, maybe it's less explicit. Maybe it was extremely hardcore stuff that they were looking at, and now it's a little bit more tame. And so again, any of those things that can help you hold on to hope as a mother, as a spouse, but also to help you to praise your children. And it is interesting. There are times where if I've got someone who's been struggling with porn daily, my homework assignment is, all right, let's choose 3 days this week you're going to look at porn. And it sounds so strange, but like that's better than.
And then you're letting them like, this is again, like you're going to act and not be acted upon. Cause before, it's just like, oh, it's coming up and you just feel, almost this victim to what's, in front of you instead of, no, you're going to choose instead of it choosing.
And I think some people are like, well, I just have to cold turkey it. And so when I'm like, how about 3 times this week? Wait, what? I can do that? Like, it's every day right now. So let's go with improvement.
Work on that.
Yeah. And so we want to see that and encourage that as much as possible. I don't know a whole lot of parents that are going to be like, so what days are you looking at porn, hon?
Yeah.
But in therapy, we can try to help that progress and that
especially, if you're at that level, likely, where it's every day or multiple times a day, to go cold turkey is probably just completely unrealistic at that point.
Trying to think if I've ever known of a circumstance where it's been that way. I've known a couple people that are close, but that's because the consequences were so severe that and then their hearts were in the right place. And they're like, all right, I'm done. But that's a rare occurrence.
So give them that time, show them that it's working, praise them for the progress that they're making, and do it as a team.
Yeah. And it's good for you to hold on to that hope. Like if you're seeing that progress as well as a mother or as a spouse, it can give you hope too. That it's like, okay,
like we're going in the right direction.
It's not great, but we're going in the right direction.
And to realize that if you, in any sort of addiction, there's going to be times where there's relapses that you take 10 steps back, but that doesn't mean that you've lost all ground.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, for that day and what happened there, like that's hard, but let's realize that we're not stuck there,
And those are great learning opportunities too. Like, well, let's talk about what went wrong. You've been doing really well. You've been progressing. Where do you think you got off track a little bit? And let's talk about that and learn from it as much as possible. So.
And I think that's really hard to do unless, I'm guessing, like as a spouse, if you haven't taken your heart out of it, because it sounds, the way you're talking, it's like, man, that sounds so nice. But I mean, with women that are going through this, I bet, that'd be really hard to say it like that. And maybe that's when counseling, if you can't maybe be at that point as a spouse, maybe it's like, and counseling is the way to go.
Yeah. And a lot of times to do that work with a therapist is really beneficial because I can say things and approach things in a way that a spouse or even a parent can't do it.
Right. And there's so much more at stake, right? Because that relationship, is there. Yeah. So.
And again, sometimes the spouse doesn't want to take the responsibility to, point it out. Like it just kind of depends on how they've decided to support each other and how they want to approach it. And so
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful. And then the last thing with the child, teach them a healthy view of sexuality. Hate porn, not sex. And particularly because it is most likely that their only association with sex is coming from porn. It's good, again, here are our values around sex.
And this can be a beautiful, healthy thing in the right boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be like, from what you saw, did it seem like they really loved each other? Do you think this was something that brought them together? Or, and again, if it's a teenager, they can understand a little bit more that pornography is focused on pleasure and the physical aspect. But where healthy sexuality can have pleasure and physical, there's connection, there's commitment, there's emotion, all of those things that make it a much more fulfilling experience that porn just doesn't show.
Just doesn't have. Right.
And so, that's with the child. Okay. The spouse is pretty similar too. Talk with their spouse about what they plan to do about pornography use. Again, we're going to empower you. This is your behavior. I'm here to support, but what's your plan? And usually I say, I don't know is not an answer, but think about it. But what is the plan? Because we want to figure this out. And if the plan is, I don't care, I'm not going to do anything about it. Well, that's good for the spouse to be aware of. And then they get to choose what to do based on that information.
And at that point, if there was a situation like that, what do you do?
Well, then it comes down to
is there healthy boundaries at it?
It comes to, is this a deal breaker for you? If they continue their behavior, where are you at with it? And there might be boundaries. It's like, okay, well, I don't love it, but I don't, I hate the thought of divorce even more. But you kind of help them negotiate that. And you don't see that very often.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, when you do, it's not the greatest for marriages and relationships. Most of the ones I've seen don't work out because it is a deal breaker.
Yeah, as far as one of the people saying don't care, I'm just going to keep doing this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can imagine that because there's no even willingness to hey, let's figure this out or something.
Or consider your spouse's feelings around certain things. And if that's gone,
then
there's
what else is there?
Not a whole lot left.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. Wow.
So being able to talk about what they're going to do, discuss ways to eliminate porn from the home, again, find professional help. Is it an individual therapist, a couples therapist? Is it support groups? Yeah. Is it all of the above? Yeah. And again, you want to be careful that you don't make your whole life and all your free time about overcoming porn.
Yeah.
And so just kind of being able to recognize no, we need that support, but we also need healthy things. And that's, again, if we're looking, one other thing, watch for improvement, kind of the same example, less extreme, less frequent, less amount of time spent. And then finally find ways to grow closer as a couple, rather than allowing this to tear you apart. What can you do?
Invest more into different aspects. And you're talking about not just physically, right? You're talking about in any regard.
Yeah. Time together. Can we go do more and spend more time together? Do we communicate more? Yeah. And there are lots of great tools that you can use to communicate and build that emotional intimacy in relationship. Finding shared hobbies, if you can find that. And then, sexual intimacy. Again, when the spouse who may feel betrayed or whatever, when they're ready, that, again, we don't want to get rid of healthy sexuality.
Yeah.
Unless there's some time needed to heal. And then that's a process that therapy and stuff can help with. So it really depends on the individual. I've had some women that are like, oh my gosh, I want to connect with my husband and I want to have sex so bad, but he's struggling with this. So I probably shouldn't, right?
You're like,
and I'm like,
wait a minute.
no, I mean, if you're feeling okay and you're comfortable, like, let's not get rid of the healthy expressions just because
and
there's
these ways
been
of connecting
the unhealthy.
and binding together. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a balance there because you get into that personalization. It's like, well, if I just was more available, then, and if we do it 3 times a day, he'll never want to look.
You're like, it still doesn't work like that.
Yeah. So we want to find that balance with that approach.
That is neat.
So.
Okay. I had a question, but
yes, no, go ahead. That was the end of the one to help the spouse.
Okay. And maybe this goes along, maybe this doesn't, but, I don't know if you've heard of this or seen this, but there was, this man that spoke, that pretty much said everything that you know about addiction is wrong. Have you seen that TED Talk? Okay.
No.
It was fascinating. He was just going into the science of addictions and what they were studying with these rats, and pretty much, if their life, if their experience was fulfilling, as far as emotionally, if they had enough other rats around them, if it was, food and whatnot. But it was really about this connection. They didn't see these rats go to this, I can't remember what drug that they were feeding these rats. But anyway, and we may totally cut this out. But the whole point of it was fascinating that when they eliminated connection, the rats defaulted to overdosing on these drugs. And then when they didn't, there may have been like an occasional use, but he was trying to prove the point. Like, if you get a knee replacement and if you're not careful, you could be addicted to those pain medications and you better be careful. And he was pretty much saying like, what we know about addiction is if we have truly healthy, connection, and that is prevalent, the risk of addiction actually is really low.
I believe
What
that.
do you believe on that?
I believe that.
Really?
In fact, when I first got trained in working with pornography challenges, struggles with pornography, one of the things that they did a technique called face it, replace it, and connect, kind of a thing, and be able, kind of encouraging people to find that connection. And I've tried to incorporate that, not quite in the same way, but as I've kind of gone a little bit different ways in my approach with working, with those who struggle with this. Yeah, that connection is huge. And, whether it's check-ins, whether it's, if you have healthy relationships, it may not be the perfect solution, but it's going to help a lot more than if it's like, well, he doesn't deserve my time and let him go sleep in the other room, or whatever the mentality might be. And again, that's understandable because of the pain that's created because of this. But yeah, that idea is, it just goes back to what's bringing us closer together as a couple and what's pulling us further apart.
Yes.
And sometimes our people's reaction to the pornography use, to have, discovering it or having it disclosed to them, is just as damaging to the relationship. Now, value-wise, it's different, pornography, but like when you're just talking about the relationship, a lot of how people react is just as detrimental than the actual pornography use is.
I think that's a good, I think that's hard to hear, I'm sure, but I think that's a good reality check to be like, how I show up can make or break what's happening here, right?
Hopefully it doesn't break.
Maybe not that extreme,
but it does have a strong influence on where things go. Yeah. And I want to be careful. Like, I don't want to put all of the responsibility on the other spouse, but no, definitely if you step back and say, well, is what I'm doing pulling me further apart or bringing us closer together? It just is a really good question to kind of gauge where we're at.
Yeah, I love that.
So,
okay.
All right. One of the last things. So for mothers, for spouses, what can they do? Again, hate the porn, not the person. Can we separate that? Make that distinction. And that can be hard a lot because it feels like both are creating that pain.
Yeah.
And in a way, the choices of the person with the behavior does, but let's hate the porn. Usually there's a lot of love for the person. That's why it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
There are other people looking at porn that we don't even know or may not have love for necessarily.
And it doesn't affect us because we don't have that connection.
It doesn't hurt. It's unfortunate that they're going through that, but we don't feel that personal pain that comes in. One of the things I love to have people do is to write an angry letter. There's so much emotion that gets built up, and it's like, where do I put this?
Yeah.
And I give them permission to use any kind of language they want, because there's just this ugliness, and it's like, let's get it out on paper. Don't necessarily share it with anyone, but it is good to express, to get that out. And so many people are just like,
it's just pent up.
Okay, well, I can't say that, and I need to be super proper. And I've had some that write letters like, what you did really hurt my feelings.
You're like, just say it out.
I can't express the amount of and it's like, wait, no, go back. I want this to be raw, like everything, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you. Like, if I didn't care more, I would do this or that, or like, just get it all out.
Get it out. And they say even writing, like I took a whole course on just writing, and it's like the power of being able to write and what happens to the brain instead of just thinking it, and the processing differently when you're writing. I mean, it's very beneficial.
Yeah, sort of like when you get a wound and it gets pus in it. Yeah. We want to like open that up and let it out so the healing can start to take place.
That's a good analogy.
It's ugly and it's gross and it's not pretty and it doesn't have to be. But if you can get that out, the healing can start.
Then the healing can start
a little bit more effectively.
That's good.
So
that's good.
It's fun. Yeah, I'll send people back sometimes, but then we'll read through it. Sometimes I'll have them read it to me and they're like, "Oh, Rich, no, I don't want to read it." But if you can read it and then just say, "All right, what do we want to throw out? But what are maybe some things that might be good to hold on to, that we need to process, that we need to work through?" And usually it's not a whole lot of it. They just needed to get those feelings out. But there might be some things that are helpful to work through therapeutically. So
that makes sense.
Love the angry letter. It's fun. I think I mentioned be a support, not a savior. Again, it's not necessarily your place to do it for them. Yeah. We can support, but they'll only change to the degree that they're willing to work on it and change. And
I've heard the quote, what you are responsible for, you if you're not responsible for it, you can't control it. If you cannot control it, you're not responsible for it. It's like, nor do other humans want to be physically controlled. Yeah. Right. And so especially as an adult, I think with kids, like we can help. There's a lot more mentoring
you guide
and
them
hands-on because the prefrontal cortex isn't even developed at that point. But with an adult, I think that's hard because we want to go into the, like, with anybody going through a hard time, it's like, oh, let me come in and let me jump in and
let me fix this.
Let me fix it. Yeah.
And that doesn't really work long term.
Yeah.
So be quick to forgive. And that's a hard one, but forgiveness really is a great practice for the person forgiving. Sometimes we think, oh, we're letting them get away with things, or we're saying it's all right. But it really is just that idea of, I'm not going to keep holding on to this.
To this negative toxicity that is affecting me as a person. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to forgive. I'm not saying it's okay. I still, I've got my standards and my boundaries, but I don't need to sit there and be angry. Now, again, that's easier said than done, but if we can work on that forgiveness process.
And I think that's so important to have people realize, like, forgiveness is not condoning what they did all of a sudden is right. It's like, it's okay. Like what you did is okay. It's like, no, there's times that it will never be okay. Yeah. And yet you can still forgive because you're relieving yourself of the pain. It doesn't, so much forgiveness is really about us, not the other person.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly. I think we have a hard time forgiving because we're afraid. Kind of goes into that control part again. If I let go, I'm going to get hurt somehow, and I'm going to get hurt again. And the reality is, the more we hold on, the more pain we actually create for ourselves. We actually hurt ourselves more. And so if we can be willing to let go of that, and then, try to approach it the best we can. Way. And I'm talking in ideals here. Like, I know that it's hard, but if we can do that, it's so much healthier.
Wow.
And that gets into the last one, don't personalize. And we did, talk about that a little bit, being careful not to make it about ourselves.
Yeah, don't take it personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I can just, one of the last things here, there's this great quote. There's a book called From Heartache to Healing, talking about sexual and pornography addictions, Colleen and Philip Harrison. But this is what they said about personalizing. They said, unfortunately, one of the first reactions a woman has when she learns of her husband's pornography problem, or learns that it is still a problem, is to assume that there must be something lacking in her, or something that she's doing or not doing that causes him to need to indulge in such behavior. This train of thought is a total fallacy. If pursued and believed, it leads to even more heartache. You must be grounded in truth to avoid this lie, to ignore it when it comes to your mind, and to forgive others who thoughtlessly suggest it to you. Yeah, we didn't even touch on that. Like other people being like, well, why do you think he's doing this? Are you not doing what you need to do at home? Or like sometimes there are those messages. But I love that quote because it is the key to all of this. When I work with people who are struggling with the behavior, working with those who love them, is about getting to the truth. And if we can get to the truth about what's going on, that can help with the personalizing. It can help bring us a little bit more peace and power in our lives. Yeah. And the reality is, most of the time with pornography use, if it's going against our values, it's because people are making excuses and justifications rather than holding on to the truth. And so if we, that's the fundamental key that I use, like, how do we get to the truths that are going to help you choose something differently? So there's just so much power in getting to the truth.
That is a beautiful quote. And to realize, a lot of the, in addiction in general, a lot of, or maybe even most, they are coping mechanisms. And whether it's, porn or alcoholism or, it's these unhealthy coping mechanisms that, that people are bringing into their lives because maybe they haven't been taught how to self-regulate when they're feeling all sorts of different emotions. And we really, as a society, haven't taught that well.
No.
Why is that not taught in grade school, right? In large regards. But anyway, so to realize it's like, hey, this is a default. It doesn't have to do with you or how much he cares about your, and I think that can really help women, empower women and help them realize their value does not change based on what their husband is viewing.
Exactly.
It doesn't. So,
and just finally, if I can say with this, to all of those mothers, to those women out there, hold on to hope. Truly, there is a lot of hope out there. There might be some listening to this that are like, you're crazy, Rich. How can I ever feel hope? But I have seen people's lives change. I've seen people be able to do it, to live, based on their values. And there are strengths and just wonderful qualities that a mother can have, to help their children through this. And our children are just so privileged to have good mothers who love and who care. And you know what? It's beautiful. Even I would say sacred work as a mother to be able to do that. And so hold on to that hope. You guys are powerful. You truly are.
Thank you. Wow, I'm going to start tearing up. You're so amazing. Thank you so much. This has been
welcome.
Any mom that's listening to this, just the fact that you're listening to this is proof that you're in it. You're there. You want to help. You want to understand things better, and you want to help navigate something in this life that we live in that is hard, and you're willing to show up and learn something about it so that you can help and you can love, love in different ways. And so anyway, I love everything that you've shared. I'm so grateful that you've taken your time as a professional to come and teach all of us as moms how we can better navigate something like this.
It's truly been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rich.